Hey guys, welcome to the Wealth for Real YouTube channel. I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio. Today is Monday, May 22nd, 2023, and I'm actually picking back up where I left off in a previous video with this really great article that I strongly recommended in that first video. I won't go over all the reasons why at the top level, but this New York article about the Getty family's trust issues, kind of talking about the Getty family, and their trust and their dynastic wealth as a backdrop to a current legal situation between one of their wealth managers and two of John Paul Getty's granddaughters. So that's what this article is about. But what I want to focus on in this video, I want to jump down here through all this stuff about the lawsuit to this second major section. You can see it starts right here with the arc of an American fortune, goes from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And so in this section, a couple things that jumped out at me. The big thing that jumped out at me in here, guys, that I think is worth focusing on if you, A, haven't really thought long and hard about tax avoidance, how to accomplish it in your own situation, don't realize, the vast trove of goodies in the tax code about how you can avoid taxes. If you're sort of unaware of all that, you're going to get something out of this section. This section is really going to open your eyes at a very top macro level. Like, it's nowhere near enough to take action on, but it would give you a sense of like, oh wow, okay, like there's another world out there tax wise that like involves not paying taxes. So just super macro. On the flip side, if you are aware of tax avoidance, generally speaking, and some of the possibilities, this is just going to kind of buttress it for you. This is just going to add texture and kind of interesting anecdotes and potentially other little data points you can follow up on to flesh out your understanding of it. So there's something for everybody in here. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of generally step through some of these paragraphs in this section. There's like 6 or 7 of them, something like that. But here's the intro part, with the famous quote, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Generally meaning, there's a generation that makes the money, a generation that, stabilizes or kind of consolidates the wealth in the family, and then a generation that spends it all. Okay, that's how I've always understood that. 3rd generation ruins the house is a Japanese version of it. The Germans say acquire it, inherit it, destroy it. So anyway, so in this paragraph here, they're talking about how wealthy families in America, and they're specifically talking about clans like the Cooks, the Waltons, the Mars family, how really since like the 80s, their fortunes have exploded. And they even have an interesting data point down here. In 1978, top 0.1% of Americans owned 7% of the nation's wealth, but today it's 18%. So you're really talking about a near tripling of that number in the last, 40 to 50 years. Okay, so that was kind of interesting there, but that's what this paragraph is about here. In this paragraph, they talk about how at one point, you're going back about 100 years, in American law, inheritances got siphoned off with like estate taxes and just huge. I mean, the income tax was pretty huge about 100 years ago on very wealthy people to begin with, but the estate tax really kind of trimmed down the ability to pass on these huge fortunes and so forth. I mean, it still happened. Obviously, you still had very wealthy families doing that, but I guess it wasn't as easy or as prevalent as it is today, is the point they're making here. So again, an interesting data point here. A couple economists at University of Cal Berkeley, average tax rate on top 0.01% fallen by more than half to about 30%, since this much earlier time frame here, while rates for bottom 90% have climbed slightly to an average of 25%. So, I mean, knowing that the 0.01% went down by half from like 60-ish to 30 is pretty staggering. Okay, so that kind of jumped out at me there. Interesting quote in this paragraph talking about advisors to ultra-rich families consider this like the golden age of tax avoidance. And that's what the general theme was for this area that I wanted you guys to kind of take away from this. But this guy here, Marvin Bloom, Texas lawyer and accountant, gave a seminar to fellow accountants figuring out how to profit from the influx of wealth that needed protecting. And he says, quote, conditions for leaving large sums have never been better. Congress has not closed an estate planning loophole in over 30 years. Okay, so again, for people who are upset by this, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't be, everybody's going to have a different opinion, but just if you're upset, don't forget about the source here. Don't forget that Congress is writing these laws that then wealthy people are taking advantage of and then using their wealth to make sure Congress never changes the law, right? You have a very symbiotic loop going on there. Both sides complicit. Neither is off the hook. But I just feel like in popular media, you usually hear about the wealthy people, but you don't hear about Congress. And I think you have to look at the relationship between the two, how they're very hand in glove. And this point here kind of underscores that. Okay. Let's see. Report from 2021 Treasury Department estimate the top 1% of taxpayers are responsible for 28% of the nation's unpaid taxes, meaning there's about $160 billion shortfall there. Arguable whether $160 billion really makes any difference at this point when we talk about having a national debt of 30-something trillion, but it's a notable point. Okay, so next paragraph. Okay, and this is where you're going to hear me come back to this point a lot on here in terms of like, generally speaking, how to reduce taxes, how to stay out of high tax situations and get into low tax situations. But right here, they're pointing out that certain lines of work mean less taxes. So if you have complex investments, it's much easier to avoid taxes than if you get income off a W-2 is essentially what they're saying here, okay? Same is true of tips and cash, which is how many low-income workers receive their wages because the income is regularly reported to the IRS. So you can't avoid it. They're getting your W-2. They know how much you made, and they're just taxing you right off the top of that. But the wealthiest Americans have access to ever more creative dodges, most of them legal, but some illegal, and some on the murky border in between. So well said there. Okay, let's see. The lucrative maneuvering, specialized attorneys, accountants, money managers, family offices, which have roots. So, of course, this is a very niche specific topic that I'm very kind of fascinated by. So this jumped out at me, the fact that the family office has roots in 19th century Rockefeller operations. That was kind of notable. And then these family offices have like no public presence. Like Gordon Getty, in this Getty family situation here, his family office is just Vallejo, I think I'm saying that correctly, maybe not, investments. So they just kind of point this out here that in order to perpetuate this situation, you have these specialized positions, jobs, professions, offices that this is their whole thing, is to figure out how to effect this tax avoidance for the extremely wealthy. And then this was kind of interesting. Critics call this the wealth defense industry. I thought that was actually kind of funny. And the cultural outrage has grown lately. So there was the Mossack Fonseca law firm data spill in 2016, which showed like offshore accounts. It was like showing like which famous people or world leaders or whatnot had like money in like offshore accounts and stuff like that, and had hidden their money offshore. So that's a notable disclosure there. But what they don't say here, but they say later, is that the ProPublica tax article series that started in June 2021 and showed, like, really revealed like how extremely wealthy people were paying very, very little tax. That's also, I think, kind of contributing to this this phenomenon here, this cultural outrage. So they do get to that later in the article. I thought it was in this paragraph. It's not here. But anyway, so that's what they're talking about here. It's like it's becoming more well known that if you're wealthy, if you're powerful, you have a lot of tax avoidance opportunities in front of you, and people are taking advantage of those opportunities, and it's really upsetting. It's really upsetting the populace, I guess you could say. So here, scholars say golden age of tax avoidance has contributed to turbulence in American politics by hardening social stratification. Edward McCaffrey, professor at USC, said tax, which is supposed to be a cure, is in fact one of the problems. That is a pattern that recurs throughout history. Capital keeps getting more and more unequal until there's a crash. So here's why it's notable. I wanted to read you guys this. McCaffrey is the source, and I believe he coined the phrase, I think that's probably fairly understood at this point, of buy, borrow, die. Buy, borrow, die being the tax planning 101 tax avoidance strategy that the ultra wealthy utilize. And so they're quoting him here. He actually pops up one or two more times in the article. I'm not sure if, I think later on they're going to talk about buy, borrow, die, but just for the sake of this video, buy, borrow, die for ultra wealthy, buy assets that appreciate over time, borrow against them. Don't sell those assets. Just hold those assets forever. Borrow against them. Live off the loan proceeds, because that's not income, so you have no income tax, and then die. I shouldn't be in quotes. Eventually, you die, but when you die, the assets go to your heirs on a stepped up basis, so they don't have to pay any tax on them. And then you just rinse and repeat, and every generation does the same thing. So McCaffrey coined that phrase back when I was just searching about tax avoidance in like 2016 timeframe, I think it was. I came across McCaffrey. I came across the buy, borrow, die concept and was just absolutely blown away by it. So they quote him here, and he shows up later as well. Let's see, political pressure and 1% has generated more business for him. Income tax planning has gone up. Estate tax planning has gone up. Asset protection has gone up. His clients feel vilified. He's talking about his ultra wealthy clients. And then right here, for people born to most elevated classes, the fight over a few points difference in tax rates can feel existential. Brooke Harrington, author of Capital Without Borders, examines families like Cooks, Waltons, and Gettys who have escaped generational wealth decline thanks to a perpetual motion machine of wealth creation. The advisor's job is protecting the fortune from the family. Without clever wealth management and attorneys, Getty fortune would have gone up in smoke. By the way, guys, this book right here is one of 4 in this article that I was like, I have to read that book. So I literally ordered all 4 of them, and all 4 of them came in staggered from Amazon up to this past weekend. So super excited about reading those 4 books. Going to try to get through them as fast as possible, and we'll eventually, hopefully one day, make videos about them. But this is one of them right here, Capital Without Borders, really examining like, what is a wealth manager who's connected to one of these families? What are they doing? How do they do what they do, kind of thing? Okay, so I just want to walk you guys through this section. We'll go into some of these other sections in future videos, but just kind of wanted to give you guys, this is kind of like the very, very broad backdrop, not even about the Gettys in particular, but just ultra wealthy, tax avoidance, how they perpetuate their fortunes, is really kind of laid out at very nice macro level detail here in the article. Okay, guys, so if you enjoy this article, or you want to obviously keep seeing the series that I'm going to put out, just drop a comment or let me know if there's anything in particular you're looking for here. But I am going to make my way through this entire fairly lengthy article in this series of videos. Okay, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. Hope everybody has a great day, and I'll be back soon with more on this and other related topics.